Well, we'll go ahead and get started. Since it's 11:01, I want to be careful of everyone's time, but thanks for everyone joining. Looks like we got us a good group of team members to start with. This week or this month's topic was for environmental and surprise stormwater inspection, and we're grateful to have John Anderson with M.A. Anderson and Associates. Number one, member of the GRMCA. Number two, a member of the Safety and Environmental Committee for the GRMCA, and he has really put a good bit of emphasis on what we do throughout the committee, and has been great to work with. But I'll go ahead and introduce him, and so I can give the floor to him. But he is a licensed professional engineer in the state of Georgia and a certified Level 2 erosion and sediment control design professional with the Georgia Soil and Water Conservation Commission. He attended the Georgia Institute of Technology and graduated with a Bachelor's of Science in Civil and Environmental Engineer. John's worked for several Fortune 500 companies, Norfolk Southern, and also Southern Gas Company. But for the past several years, he's been acting manager of M.A. Anderson and Associates, which his dad started some years ago, which is a full service environmental engineering firm. Started, I think, in Alabama area, but John opened up his over in the Atlanta market, and so now they kind of got two different locations that services about 70 companies, comprising of about 150 properties throughout the U.S., and of course, with the biggest presence here in the Southeast. Compliance oversight for these companies include stormwater pollution prevention, federal EPA and state EPD, ADM, TDEC, and FDEP, etc., stormwater sampling and management, permitting, spill prevention, control, and countermeasures, Tier 2 reporting, trial reporting, emergency spill response activities, and pollution prevention structural designs and implementation. So it's my honor to get to introduce John. He's become a good friend of mine. And John, I'm going to give it to you.
Yeah. Thank you, Joseph. I appreciate that introduction, and appreciate you. And I like seeing all the Wayne Davis guys on this call today also. Wayne Davis, one of the companies that we manage all their stormwater compliance, and love working with Joseph and those guys. And I've loved being a part of this organization also with, Bill leading it and Emily also. And it's been just awesome getting to be a part of this. My team, we manage a lot of different companies throughout the Southeast, but my team always says their favorite people are the concrete people. I don't know why that is. Maybe it's something in the water. Maybe it's that cement in the water. It just seems like turns out good people. But hey, consistently, what I see day in and day out when I'm on these sites, walking these sites with the guys, with the boots on the ground, is they're concerned and they're asking me, hey, what do I do when I have a surprise EPA or EPD inspection? It could be ADM in Alabama, the state regulatory agency depends on what state you're operating in. But this is what they ask me all the time. Hey, what do I do when I have that surprise inspection? So today we're going to talk about that, how to prepare well for it, how to conduct it when it does actually happen, what to expect on the back end of it, and just sort of go through what we see day in and day out across Southeast and really the whole country. Hey, I tell Bill and Emily and Joseph all the time, hey, I teach the seniors Sunday school class at my church. I like it when people interject and ask questions. Don't, there's no stupid question on this. There's no stupid question. Jump in. See if you have something to say or you want to ask a question, that's fine. I love that. I love the interactive class. But I will also say, hey, my number and email are on the presentation. If you have a question you want to ask me that you don't want it to be part of the public discussion, feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email. We can talk offline, where not everybody's listening. If you have something maybe more private as far as the compliance goes, you want to talk about. Okay. Hold on a second. My AirPods just dropped. I'm afraid they're going to connect. Give me 1 second. Jump right into the presentation. I hear screens. Can y'all still hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. Let me see if I can share screens here. Okay, let me know if you guys can see that also.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Looks
perfect.
good.
Yes.
Perfect. I'm not a designer, so don't fault me if the colors don't match. Okay, so hey, we're operating in Georgia right now, so we're going to focus on EPD, which is Georgia's Environmental Protection Division. That's the state version of the EPA. Okay, so they oversee all of the state, but EPA Region 4 also oversees the state. You could have a surprise stormwater inspection from either of these entities. In fact, you're going to have a surprise stormwater inspection. You probably already have, most of you. If you haven't, it's only a matter of time. And so the outline for today is, hey, we're going to talk, I'm just going to give a few remarks on the regulatory climate right now, what's kind of going on that we're seeing statewide in Georgia. We're going to talk about, hey, what are some common issues that we see in the ready mix industry that I want all of you guys to be thinking about. Even if you don't have a solution for this problem right now, let's just start the conversation and talk through some of these things. And hey, we'll get there. Rome's not built in a day. Little by little, we're moving in the right direction. We'll talk about some of those common issues that we're thinking about. And then, hey, the big talking point right now is Trump has now gotten elected. He's going to take office in a few weeks. There's been a lot of conversation about DOGE and him cutting the regulatory agency with Elon and Vivek. And the guys are asking me, the guys and girls, hey, is this going to affect me? Is this going to affect my business? So I'll have a few remarks on that. And then the practical part of this talk, hey, pre-inspection, you haven't been inspected yet. Let's just say it's going to be a surprise in the next year. What do you need to know now to get ready for this, next year for when that inspection may happen? Okay, during the inspection, hey, that regulator, he knocks on the door, she knocks on the door. What do? How do you respond practically in that moment? And then post-inspection, it's all wrapped up, they've left. What do you expect to happen in the coming weeks or the coming months? And how to go ahead and respond to that inspection there in the moment. And then I'll just have a few closing marks on how preparing well for the surprise inspection. Just some summary remarks at the end. Like I said, jump in here if you guys and girls have any questions or comments. Okay, let me just give a few comments on the current regulatory climate in the state of Georgia. Hey, one thing we're seeing, and Bill can talk about this also because he's got his finger on the pulse of so many of the concrete organizations throughout the Southeast is, hey, the regulators are becoming more aggressive. They're becoming more aggressive. They're moving into territories that they weren't very active in the past. We're seeing actually them become more active south of Interstate 16. On the way down to Savannah. It used to be EPD just didn't spend a lot of time in that area. The whole Jessup, Brunswick, Waycross area. Well, they're moving in. They're getting more active in areas that they didn't used to be very active in. They're also bringing in a lot of new people. A lot of the baby boomer generation has retired out of these organizations, and they're getting a lot of young college kids or kids that are not too far removed from college. So you got a lot of new people coming in. They're into new territories, and then with that, these new regulators, hey, they're doing their best, but they actually don't know a lot of the history of what's happened at the sites in the past, and who the site managers are. And sometimes you have the same regulator for a decade or 2 decades. They know the companies, they know the people. They can work with each other. They know what's happened. But actually, I just got called down to South Atlanta for an issue down close to East Point. EPD wanted to come in, meet with one of my clients about an issue. We sit down at the big conference room table, and 2 regulators that I had never met before. I think they were pretty new with EPD. And it turns out what they wanted to talk about was an issue that I had explained to EPD over 10 years ago. And I had ongoing conversations with EPD about it. EPD knew all about the issue, but those people at EPD had now retired. They had replaced them with some new people. These new people had no idea. They were doing the best they could. And, they were coming in perhaps to drop the hammer. And it turns out it was an issue that had been addressed a long time ago. So we're seeing, personnel turnover, moving into new territories, but also sort of this knowledge gap where, some of the people that have been there a long time have now retired, and we're having to re-educate some of the regulators, so to no fault of their own. So all that to say, Georgia is getting more active from a regulatory standpoint. Okay, so what does that mean for our industry in particular? Joseph and I talk about this. Zach and I talk about this all the time. I talk to all the concrete guys, talk to the Quikrete guys about this all the time. Hey, the common stormwater issues, Quikrete's not ready mix, but in the ready mix industry, it's just simple stuff, actually. Concrete's not a complicated product, and it's the simple stuff that actually usually winds up being the issue. Housekeeping, are our piles in order, in place, or is stuff spread out all over the site and the site's just a mess? Because when that happens, we get the total suspended solids, the floating solids in the water that makes the water more muddy. Now, I got to tell you guys, I go to sites all the time, and people tell me all the time, well, it's natural. The contamination is natural. And what they mean by that is, hey, all this dirt and silt and sediment we have tilled up that's gotten into the water, that's natural. Dirt is natural. But from EPD's perspective, they don't care if it's natural or if it's unnatural. If you have muddy water, and believe it or not, muddy water is the biggest contaminant in the state of Georgia, they will regulate for that, and they'll come down on you for that. So total suspended solids, just how muddy is the water? Of course, pH from the cement, that's a common thing in the concrete industry. And then, hey, the biggest thing that we're talking about right now is all this drum washout water. The Wayne Davis guys, they've been doing a great job making all of their washout bays closed loop, recycling that water and reusing that water in their processes. But hey, you go to enough concrete sites, you're going to show up sometimes on a dry, sunny day, and you're going to see coming out of the washout pit or the detention pond or whatever, this white streak right down into the woods from where the site was just too busy. They were washing out lots and lots of their trucks, and their pit overflowed and left the site. Okay, you don't want that to happen. And when you show up on a dry, sunny day, you do not want any liquids leaving the property boundary. You don't want any liquids leaving the property boundary. We're going to talk more about this in the coming months. If you want to pick my brain about that, feel free to give me a call or shoot me an email after the presentation. And by the way, I can't see you guys while I'm giving this presentation, but y'all feel free to interrupt me, chime in if you have any questions or comments on this. Okay, those are the common stormwater issues in ready mix industry. Okay, so let me give a few just notes on this question I'm getting asked all the time. Will Trump taking office affect how I'm regulated? Hey, politicians, and to Trump's credit, he doesn't seem like as much of a politician as most politicians, but they make all these promises. Hey, is this actually going to affect me, my site, or my company, practically? And, I think the short answer to that is, in the state of Georgia, all of the stormwater regulations are state-based, not federal-based. Okay? And so the federal government gives the states the authority to regulate the companies within their jurisdiction or within their own state. And so the federal government has turned over Georgia's environmental to the state of Georgia, which is why we have the Georgia EPD. Trump, when he's talking about cutting the regulations, he's largely talking about the federal framework. And so he's talking about, interstate commerce regulations, things that are on the federal level. I don't think that his 4 years in office is going to have a big impact on the state level. I don't think it's going to have a big impact on the state level. So all that to say, hey, all of the stuff that we have ongoing in the concrete industry, I don't expect this to change from an environmental regulatory standpoint in the coming 4 years. Now, Trump may make some changes on the federal EPA level, and then those may have a trickle down effect on the state. But I don't expect it to happen quickly because all of these regulatory cycles are on 5-year cycles. So new laws and regulations get published in the state of Georgia every 5 years. The next one is scheduled to be published in 2027. I don't expect it to change significantly simply because it's not a federal regulation, it's a state regulation. Okay. But what
Hey, John?
yeah.
Yeah, real quick, not to get into the weeds, but if
Sure.
you use your imagination, as far as something that might at federal level trickle down, as you use that phrase, what might we see in that realm?
Well, what you see every 5 years, Bill, is the EPD publishing, a whole new regulatory framework where essentially they're building on the past regulatory framework from the previous 5 years. And it's their way of, I hate to use this analogy, but tightening the noose little by little. If they come in and come to, let's say Wayne Davis, for instance, and say, hey, Joseph, you got to do, 1 million things. It's too overwhelming for the company, and the company, sort of checks out. We can't do it. We can't afford it. We can't do it. But if they can say, hey, we want you to do 10 things for this 5-year cycle, but then 5 years later, they're going to add 10 more things to that list. And then, 5 years after that, they're going to add 10 more things to that list. So the state builds little by little from a regulatory perspective. I think what we could see is in the coming cycle, they don't add a lot of new regulations to what currently exists. I don't think they're going to cut a lot of the existing regulations, but I think it's possible that the noose doesn't, the tightening of the noose doesn't increase much in the coming cycle. I hope that's the case. Does that answer your question, Bill?
Yeah, no, that's all. Just a little hint, just some of your thoughts.
Sure. But I think actually practically what I'm the most hopeful for in terms of Trump taking the office is it calming down some of the field regulators. The last 4 years, my clients and we have seen the field regulators get much more aggressive. Georgia is not as bad as some other states, but I have a situation up in the state of Alaska. It's a mining company up there. We manage. They do a fantastic job. I mean, they really do a fantastic job. They invest a lot of money in environmental. It's a family-owned business. But the state came in and found some, documents that the guys just forgot to print. It wasn't that they didn't have them. And the state's now trying to fine them, basically 1 year worth of the company's profit. And it's like, it's crazy. It's like they're trying to put them out of business. The regulators have gotten carried away there and they've overstepped the line. I'm hopeful, and we're seeing that to Georgia, but to a much lesser extent. We're seeing it in Missouri. We're seeing it in Texas. I'm hopeful that, Trump taking office, calms down some of these over-aggressive regulators that we're seeing in the field. Because there's a gray area in terms of how to enforce the law. You have the law, the written law, but there's a gray area in terms of how to enforce it. And they've become much more aggressive the last 5-6 years. One practical effect of Trump taking office is maybe they just calm down. They're a little bit less aggressive. Any questions or comments on that? I know that's a hot topic right now, so happy to answer any more questions. Thank you for your question, Bill. Okay, so hey, practically speaking, in summary, I don't think it's going to have a big impact on the written laws in the state of Georgia. I think it could calm down some of the field inspectors where they're just a little less aggressive with the sites. Okay, so let's move to the practical part of the inspection. Hey, this is what you guys want to know. Hey, before we get inspected, let's say, the state tries to get to every company at least once a year. Practically speaking, it doesn't happen. I should say every site at least once a year. It doesn't happen because the states are just so busy. But let's just say you're going to get inspected, next May or next July or sometime in the coming year. What do you need to be thinking about now? Now, this is the most basic rule, and I give this talk every day, both to my team and the guys in the field, the sites, the general managers, the plant managers. I give this talk all the time. So I want you, if you take nothing else from this talk, listen to this. And I call it the 95% rule. The 95% rule. Okay. When a regulator shows up to your site, he is looking or she is looking for just two things in general. One, is your paperwork complete and in order? And then two, does your site look good? You know, is it clean? Is it organized? Or, you know, do we have piles just strewn out all over the place? Is our boneyard, you know, our lay down yard just a mess? We've been hoarding materials for the last 30 years that we're never going to use. You know, we've never cleaned out our detention pond. It's absolutely full. It's not even a detention pond anymore. It's just full of, you know, white soot. You know, these are the things they're looking for. But if they show up on your site and you got your notebook there with your permit, your stormwater plan, your quarterlies, your laboratory, it's all there organized. And we keep these organized for all of our sites. You got all of it right there. You can just hand it to them. They can see you're on top of your paperwork. And then they just look around your site and see, hey, your piles are, you know, in order, and things are organized, and, you know, things are pretty clean. You know, I tell the guys, hey, try to keep it like you keep your backyard. You know, you want to take some pride in your site. Often, if those two things are in place, your paperwork and just your general housekeeping, they get right back in the car and they leave the site. Well, what's the reason for that? Hey, they got bigger fish to fry. If they show up and it's clear you're on top of your stuff, they don't. That's 95% of it right there. You know, they got other stuff they got to take care of. So I tell the guys, try not to give them a reason to dig, because you guys know if they want to dig at our sites in our industry, they can always find something. They can always find something. So try not to give them a reason to dig. Hey, here's the notebook. The site's clean. If those two things are in place, often they won't even dig. But like I said, if they show up, hey, we've been spilling diesel fuel where we're fueling our equipment. We see this big, you know, patch on the ground, you know, at 20 feet by 10 feet, discolored from diesel fuel. Our detention pond hasn't been cleaned out. You know, we got mud tracked out in the street, you know, 30 yards down the public road. Okay, hey, give me your paperwork. I'm gonna start going through all your paperwork, you know, line by line. Okay, I'm gonna walk your site. Hey, let me climb down in the outfall. Let me see if there's a white streak out into the woods. Yeah, they're gonna start to dig if they see stuff like that. So try not to give them a reason to dig. Any questions or comments on that? So, you know, like I said, I give the talk all the time. I call it the 95% rule. Hey, if your paperwork's in order and your housekeeping is in order, that's 95% of the battle right there. They usually get right back in their car and leave. So we try not to give them a reason to dig. Okay.
John,
yes, sir.
One question that I think probably some of our guys may have it as well, but as far as the paperwork, I know you and I have spoken, but what is the rule as far as having paperwork on hand versus in a digital file?
So in Georgia, every state's different, but in Georgia, you have to have your notice of intent printed out on your site. So, you know, in the notebooks we keep for you, one of the chapters is your notice of intent. You got to have your stormwater plan printed out and signed and certified and dated right there. And so, hey, all the site managers, you know, they have signed their stormwater plans, and we audit these when we go to the site, make sure they're signed, make sure they're dated. But then actually it's a little bit of a gray area on the other stuff. You know, the state industrial stormwater permit, you have to have access to it. EPD has told me on the phone, hey, John, if the guys have that electronic format, that's okay with us. We keep it printed as part of the notebooks just because, hey, I'd rather have it there on site in case the guys can't find the electronic version. Same thing for the quarterlies. EPD has told me on the phone, it's okay with us if they don't have those on site, but they got to have an electronic version. We go ahead and, you know, more and more, we're just printing those and keeping those on site just in case anything goes missing electronically. But the things that they have to have are their notice of intent and their stormwater plan on site in hard copy with a wet signature. Any other comments or questions on that? Okay. So, don't give them a reason to dig. Have your paperwork in order, have your sites clean like you keep your backyard. All right. During the inspection, let's see, where are we? 11:26. Okay. We're right on time. During the inspection, what do? Okay. So, hey, it's that day, it just so happens it's May 26th. You get a knock on the door. You're trying to batch. Suddenly, the person's got a hard hat and a safety vest, and it's not Joseph and it's not me. And you're thinking, who is this person? And they tell you, hey, we're EPD. We're coming to do inspection. Okay, what do you do? What do you do? And the first thing, I want to note is, this top question. Are all inspections created equal? Are all inspections created equal? And the short answer is no. Now let me ask you guys, what do you think, or how do you think the reason for the inspection may change what happens during the inspection? What are some common reasons they would inspect you?
A complaint from somebody else.
For an incident, wastewater, or I don't know, a spill or something like that would have required additional help.
Sure. So I heard one person said complaints. Hey, a neighbor or somebody complained. Then someone else said, hey, there's an incident. Maybe we self-reported. We had a spill or something like that. What are some other reasons they may show up for an inspection?
Sale of property.
Sell the property. So, hey, this property sold. We want to see who's operating it. We had that happen down in Savannah just 2 weeks ago. A client bought a new site. EPD, first thing they did, they wanted to go and look at the site that just sold. We want to see what condition it's in. Okay, that's a good. One other thing I'll add is, what we mentioned earlier. Hey, it's just the annual inspection. That's just this. You're on their checklist. They have to show that they've inspected you this year. Okay. Now, in rating those from, least aggressive to most aggressive. Hey, if it's just the annual inspection, you're just a checklist that they have to get through. They're much more likely to, hey, Joseph, do you have your papers in place? You got them. Okay. Hey, let me just look at the site. Okay. I'm back in the truck and I'm on the road. Why? Because I got, 7 more I have to get through today. But if EPD gets a complaint from a neighbor, they are obligated to go and investigate the inspection or investigate the site. And so, okay, that's a different level now. We're talking about a different level. They're going to come, okay, I want to see exactly what the source of the complaint was. I want to walk the site. Is there something else that could be contributing to this? Is the site hiding something from me? Hey, let's check your paperwork. It's a different level. And then, hey, if we had a spill or we self-reported or, something like that, then they're going to come in and it's going to be on that higher level also. They're really going to be paying attention. So, all that to say, hey, if you get that, when you get that knock on your door, they're not all created equal. And so it's worthwhile to ask, hey, yes, absolutely. Welcome to the site. We're happy for you to do an inspection. What's the reason for the inspection? It's okay to ask that question. And then what their answer is going to dictate, what you're in for that day. Okay, how many inspectors will come? Usually it's just one, but if it's a complaint or if they're doing training, they'll come with more than one. I've seen them come with up to like 6 or 7. What will happen when they arrive? The first thing they'll do is they'll probably say, hey, can we see your paperwork? You'll hand them your notebook. They'll see your SWIP. They'll see your documents, your permit. Okay, that's in place. Then they'll want to walk the site. So they're going to look at the paperwork first, then they're going to want to walk the site, check all your potential pollution sources, your petroleum storage, your equipment, your batching area, your drum washout area, your detention pond, and your outfall. Hey, do we see any signs of contamination in these areas? Anything we should be concerned about? And then, the next question is, can you turn them away? So if they knock on your door, can you tell them, no, like you're not going to inspect me? Okay. Legally, you cannot turn them away. And so when you do business in the state of Georgia, and when you file your notice of intent, you are telling the state of Georgia, hey, I am giving you authority to regulate me. I'm agreeing to comply with your laws and regulations. And I have to do that to do business in the state of Georgia. And so part of the agreement you're making with the state is, hey, you can show up unannounced and have access to my site. So legally, you cannot turn them away. But if it's a bad day for you, if y'all have a big pour going on and you got an Amazon fulfillment center and you're trying to get as much concrete over there as possible so they can build this out, or hey, maybe someone like Joseph, your head of EHS is on vacation and you really don't know the answer to these questions. You can ask them, hey, this is not a good day. We are batching. The site's dangerous right now. We got a lot of trucks coming in and out. Would it be possible to reschedule this for next week? And then, I can have John on site. He'll walk the site with you. It's okay to ask that question. And often a regulator is okay with that because they want answers to their questions. And if you don't have the answers, they would rather talk to somebody who does have the answers. And so, we've had many times where I've just told them, hey, it's not a good day. The guys are doing inventory today, or there's a big pour. Can y'all come back next week? Is that possible? And the answer is sure. We're happy to come back at another time. Sometimes they'll say, no, we got to do it today. And if they say no, then we have to let them. We really don't have authority to turn them away. Any questions or comments on that? Okay. So continuing on with 5. During the inspection, what to do? Okay. How should I conduct the inspection? So you're there, hey, the plant manager, your boots are on the ground. What should you do? Okay, the first thing is, hey, be kind and considerate. I can't tell you how I've seen it happen before where the person who is on site, is offended that they are regulated and tempers flare up, and that never ends well. These people, they're just trying to do their job as well. They got a checklist they have to get through. They are people made in the image of God. Even though they're regulators, we should treat them like that. Be kind and considerate. Don't lose your temper. Make it easy for them. Hey, here's my notebook. Here's my paperwork. But I will say, hey, confine the discussion to only what is asked. Okay. And so, you want to be kind. You want to be friendly. You want to be helpful. But, hey, it's not your place to discuss or tell them about the spill y'all had 12 years ago and how that neighbor complained and how that ditch, is still a source of conflict between the neighbor. No, don't offer up any information other than what just is being asked. And, they're going to ask for your paperwork. They're going to ask to walk the site. It's not your responsibility, nor should you, feel the need to discuss all of the, details of the past history of the site, or, hey, you're going to know everything about your site. You don't need to discuss everything about your site just because you know it. So, hey, what should I say and not say? And that's the same first bullet point. Answer the questions that are asked, but restrict the conversation only to what is asked. Call your EHS manager. It's okay and your consultant. Someone like me, someone like Joseph, it's okay to get them on the phone if you don't know the answer to the question. And it's always okay to just say, hey, I'll get back to you on that. I don't know the answer to that question, but I'll call up John and I'll get the answer to it. I don't remember exactly which document is my permit. I'll call him. He'll email it to you. It's okay to say that, to say you'll get back to them. Out on the Mississippi River, we got an inspector coming in Thursday for a site up in St. Louis. It's a new site manager we have for that site. I told him, hey, put me on FaceTime. We'll all do the inspection together, and then I'll be there on the phone to answer, any technical questions for the inspector. So, hey, be kind and considerate, make it easy, be polite, absolutely. But you don't have to discuss everything just because you know it. Just answer the questions that are asked. And then feel free to call your EHS manager, your consultant, loop them into the conversation, or just say, hey, I don't know the answer to that, but I will get back to you with the answer to that. Questions or comments on that? Okay. So, Emily, we're moving towards the end. I think we got just a couple more slides. Okay. So, hey, we've prepared well for the inspection. We got our paperwork in order. Our site's clean. Like we keep our backyard. The 95% rule: paperwork and housekeeping. Okay, the inspector has shown up. We were kind. We were considerate. We gave our notebook to them. They looked over the site. They had a couple questions. I told them I'd get back to them. Okay, but now they've left the site. Now they've left the inspection. What should I do immediately after the inspection is over? What should I expect now that it's over? Okay, the first thing you should do is call your EHS manager and your consultant and talk to them about what happened. By the way, I didn't put this in the slides, but while you're walking the site, anything the regulator takes pictures of, you should also take pictures of. Document whatever they document, so you can email those to me, your EHS manager. Hey, here's what they saw. Here's what they looked at. Do you see an issue here? So loop in, the rest of the team as soon as it's over. And then one thing I tell my guys all the time: hey, if we had a situation in Birmingham last year, and it was a small situation, but EPA and ADEM, they came in together. It was a joint inspection. And one of my guys had left his tank out of the secondary containment zone, and they had knocked the label off the tank. It was a petroleum tank. It wasn't in secondary containment. It didn't have a label on it. And EPA said, hey, like, this is an incorrect, storage. It's not labeled. We're going to cite this. They tell them they're going to cite it. So Andrew calls me. I tell him, let's put it in the secondary containment zone right now. Let's go get a secondary containment pallet, install it under there. Let's label it. Let's take a picture. Let's address it immediately. And then I'm going to email it to EPA, that inspector. And so literally 1 hour after they left the site, the issue that they said they were going to cite, we had already addressed it. I had emailed them proof that we had addressed it. And what's the point? The point is, or what's the goal? The goal is, hey, when the letter comes, the notice of violation or the letter of noncompliance, when that comes 30 days later, you want to address the issues before they ever have a chance to write the letter. And so chances are, when that letter is written, if the issue has been addressed immediately and they know it's been addressed immediately, they're going to leave that out of the letter of noncompliance, and you may not even get a letter if you address it immediately. So, hey, rope in the EHS manager, the consultant, address the issues immediately. Let's provide the proof in writing to the inspector. This was taken care of right there. If they're saying, hey, you got mud tracked out in the road, hey, let's get a sweeper in there. Let's sweep it up that day. Let's photograph it. Let's send it to them. So let's try to address any issues immediately. And then, okay, so that's the immediate response. But then what can you expect, in the coming months? Well, this is always tricky with a government agency. And the answer is it depends. If your site looked great and there was nothing of note, they're going to fill out their own internal report, but you may not hear anything from them. No news is good news, by the way. If you don't hear anything, that's great. If they did find some stuff and they're there taking photographs and you're taking photographs with them because you're checking it, but it's not anything, massive, then the state usually prefers to issue a letter of noncompliance before they issue a notice of violation. So a letter of noncompliance is, hey, maybe 30 days after the inspection, you'll get a letter, and it'll be in the mail, certified mail. It may be via email also, that says, hey, here are all the things at your site that were not compliant and you need to address. And they'll usually give you 30 days to address them. And if you don't address them within 30 days, you get a notice of violation. Now, if it's really egregious, they may skip the letter of noncompliance and they may go straight to a notice of violation. So we had a situation, a new client, they called me back in August. So they had a surprise stormwater inspection, same thing. They had several things that were missing, or they had some, issues with their outfalls, or, whatever it was. State writes them a letter of noncompliance. I call the state, hey, we're going to get all these things fixed right now. The state said, hey, get them fixed, write me a letter, send us an official letter. And then if you do that before the 30 days, there'll be no notice of violation. So you want to avoid the violation. Usually if you get it addressed immediately, if there is an issue, that can happen. If it's really egregious, then 30 days after the inspection, they may go straight to the notice of violation. If they give you a notice of violation and it's an egregious issue, they'll usually give you 30 days to fix whatever the issue is, whatever the violation issue is. But depending on how bad it is, it can be more severe And I've seen these things turn legal, and you never want it to get to that. You want to address the issues as quickly as possible, and make sure the state knows we're on it, we're taking care of it, and you don't have to worry about it. It'll be managed. And then if that's the case, usually, they won't take follow-up action. Now, hey, my goal in any company that we manage is for the state to know, man, these guys are above reproach. These guys, no one, if now issues are always going to happen in our industry, but if the state knows, hey, these guys, they do a great job, they are invested in this, they will take care of it. Often, you'll just get a phone call. Hey, we had this complaint, for the Tallapoosa site, or, Rockmart or Atlanta or whatever. Can y'all just go get it fixed and send us proof? We know y'all will take care of it. We don't want to come out there, just get it taken care of. That's my goal for all the ones that we manage, is to have that kind of reputation with the state. Because then you don't get an inspection, you just get a phone call instead. Okay, so post-inspection, hey, address the issue immediately. And then hopefully if that happens, you don't get any formal correspondence. Any questions or comments on that? Okay. Let's see. Just so one more slide. We'll get through this pretty quickly. So the last thing I'll say is just a couple notes. Preparing well for your inspection. It's all the things we've already talked about. Hey, prepare your paperwork. Prepare your employees. Anytime I'm on site with the guys, I try to get them to walk the site with me. And I tell them, hey, don't take this personally. My worst fear is that you hear something from EPA you haven't first heard from me. So it's okay with me if I tell you something and you just say, John, I don't have the time or the money to address that. That's okay. But I at least want you to hear it from me so you're not surprised when EPA tells you. So prepare your employees, hey, by doing mock inspections, by doing these training, having them walk the site, auditing their paperwork. Hey, here's everything that EPA will be looking for. Just go ahead and have them walk with you on these, and the more you do these, the more you have the muscle memory, the more they're going to be prepared when that happens. And I try to have all my guys, when they get inspected by EPA or EPD, they're like, man, that was a lot easier than when Anderson inspected us, because you just want to be hard on them where they're ready for it. And then, hey, you prepare your paperwork, prepare your employees. And then the last thing is, hey, prepare your site. And that gets back to that backyard rule. Hey, you just want it clean, neat, and organized. If your paperwork's in place and your site looks like the same way you keep your backyard, the grass is mowed, you don't have stuff just strewn everywhere, then that's the 95% of the battle right there. So those are really the big thing, the big thrust to prepare well for the inspection. I think that's all I got for you guys. I'm going to stop sharing screens. There's my contact information. By the way, if anybody wants to, ask me some questions offline, feel free to do so. I think Emily sent out my contact information in the email as well. Happy to address any questions or comments if it's something you don't want to talk about corporately. But I'm going to stop sharing screens, and I'll open the floor up to questions or comments, or hey, feel free to chime in with here's what happened to me when I was inspected. I'd love to hear some of those stories also. So I'm going to stop sharing and open the floor. Questions, comments, or stories about what happened to you when you got inspected?
I have a question. Zach Luna from Ernst. You were talking about earlier with the on a hot sunny day, the water should not leave the property. And that's with them washing out with their trucks. Recycling is the best way.
Yeah, we're more and more. I think this is going to be just a big topic of discussion in the state of Georgia over the coming 5 or 10 years. Georgia is a business-friendly state, and they're a building-friendly state. And so they have not pressed this issue hard, but we're seeing more and more of the states other than Georgia really start to clamp down on this issue right here. The best solution for this is to make that closed loop. And so, a lot of the old sites, what you have is you have, the washout little basin where the drums are being washed out right there. But then the problem is that washout basin and the stormwater all go into the same stormwater pond right there. Well, once those things mix, it's all considered washout water. It's all considered process water. And so ideally, you have a washout basin that's not the same thing as your stormwater pond. Okay, that washout basin, that it can be in series, it can be a few of them to help with the settling. But then the last one, we have a pump in it, and we are recirculating that water and batching with it or using it as some part of our process, or even reusing it to wash out with. But it's a closed loop system where that is not just overflowing and leaving the site, out of your stormwater outfalls. Because every year EPA and EPD, they require the site to certify, hey, is there anything leaving the site that's not permitted to leave the site? And that's one thing they're looking for in the concrete, not just the concrete industry, all industrial, because a lot of industrial companies have wet processes, but that's something that they're focused on in the concrete industry.
Okay.
So we're talking more and more just, hey, as we build and develop new sites, keeping the washout basin separate from the stormwater basin, and then installing a pump or something and reusing that washout water in the process.
Gotcha. Thank you.
You bet. Because hey, under the industrial permit, you are allowed to discharge polluted stormwater. That's allowed. It's legal for you, even if it's polluted. It's legal. Now you got to improve your BMPs. You got to make improvements to help it, but you're not allowed to discharge things that are not stormwater.
Thank you, sir.
You bet. Other question. Great question, by the way. Other questions or comments?
John, in your years of experience, what's typically the worst fines that you've seen? Like what do they typically cite for?
Well, the worst fines, as in the magnitude of the fine, the monetary amount of the fine, or just what are they looking for in terms of when a fine is issued?
In general, what are they looking for when fines are issued?
The thing they're looking for in general is they're looking for bad actors. They're looking for someone that knows the right thing to do, has been told the right thing to do, and continues to not do the right thing. That's usually when a fine comes into place. Historically, that's the case. So if you got a company and I've had some of these in the past and we don't do business with them. Hey, we know the right thing and we're just not going to do the. We had a company one time, they used to discharge lead, in processed water right into their receiving stream, directly up gradient of a middle school where all the kids did their science projects. It's like, and you tell them, hey, you can't do that. They don't care. They didn't care. Those are the ones that EPD and EPA, they're looking like, okay, we're going to make an example out of you. But if you're trying to do the right thing and you're, legitimately, working towards that, usually they don't want it to get to the level of fine. Now, that being said, hey, the past few years, the situation I talked about in Alaska, some of that, the fine is a result of the owner and the site manager losing their temper when the regulator came in, and now the regulator has decided to make an example out of them. The situation, we had, I think I mentioned it to you, out in St. Louis, EPA came in, that was like an $80,000 fine. And that site wasn't even polluting. They just said, hey, you had it wasn't a concrete company, but you had some material that, could pollute the river. And we think you don't have your outfalls labeled correctly. It was actually a bunch of non-issues. So we fought that. We got that fine reduced. But, this is one thing where, hey, and I'm apolitical. I'm not saying, I'm a Biden guy or a Trump guy or anything, but I do think one thing with Trump taking office is maybe it calms some of that aggressiveness in the field down a little bit. But Joseph, to answer your question, in general, they're looking for bad actors. They're looking for people that know what they're doing and they just don't care. They're just out to make money. They don't care. Other questions or comments? And by the way, we're seeing the monetary fines getting higher and higher. It used to be like $13,000, $15,000. We're seeing like 50, 100,000, $100,000+ fines, the past few years.
Yeah,
Good
John,
question.
I've got an example to share with the team. We had a new inspector come to one of our sites last year, and the inspector did a very thorough job, and we saw some things that were, documented in the report that, historically we might not have seen from an inspector. And I'm just going to give you a couple of examples. A couple of admix tanks without control. It looked like there was some residual leaking. So that was an issue. We had a leaking, and these are things at every ready mix plant, right? A leaking truck wash soap. The pump was leaking, so we got picked on that. We had some standing water by a containment area, with algae in it, and that just looked, suspicious. Just some leaks and stains, where the truck's parked, and then we're not talking puddles of oil. We're talking residual staining, right? But that was brought up. The block wall, there was a breach in the wall, so allegedly water could leave the site through that concrete wall because the blocks looks like they might have been bumped by the loader. But yeah, very particular around the edges and the block walls, looking at the vegetation. Grass behind the maintenance building was saturated in AC and compressor condensate and beginning to decompose. We didn't have a bucket there to collect that. And then metal waste near the outfall. Well, I can see it's, a bunch of, some concrete parts and some residual staining near an outfall. So, and then as John mentioned earlier, the tracking onto the street. Again, these are all the dumpster lid was left open. It wasn't closed. A bucket of cleaner, 5-gallon bucket was uncontrolled. Was unprotected from stormwater. Somebody had just left it, back behind the concrete wall. So, we got a nice 3 or 4 page report, but it created work, right? We had to respond and correct everything and review with our manager and our yard man. These things seem small and they seem inconsequential, but they weren't. So it was, frankly, it was disappointing inspection. We need to do better, but it was definitely an eye opener, for us of what we needed to expect, and we needed to step up our game.
That's John. Let me ask you: was it a young inspector? Was it a new inspector? Tell us a little bit about the inspector, because one thing I see often now is, hey, they're hiring inspectors that are right out of college or out of masters or whatever, and they've never had any real work experience in an industrial site. So the AC compressor water dripping onto the grass. Hey, you've been around industrial sites your whole life. You're thinking, I've never seen one not drip on to the grass. But you get an inspector that's never been to an industrial site, and they suddenly cite you for that. So was that the case here or no?
Yeah, it was. I wasn't around when this one happened, but it was a newer, younger inspector. And I mean, just similarly, I've seen, even when working with some of our consultants, if you get a young consulting engineer with some of our firms, we're taking them to our sites. They're here to help us, but we're having to educate them, just into what the business is. And, that's part of it. When there's a consultant, there's there's not going to be any written reports or, things that are going to bite you. But this inspector definitely, made us toe the line. And John, like you said, the little things, the housekeeping, these were a lot of these were housekeeping related. Matter of fact, almost all of them were. And
quick question, John, Jon,
Yes.
John, or both Johns. Is there a statutory measure? In other words, not that you want to nitpick with their nitpicking, but the condensate on grass, what breach of statute is that? Is there you know what I'm saying? In other words,
So, Bill, the answer to that question is, under the Georgia Industrial Stormwater Permit, there are a list of things that you can discharge. Like, hey, you're allowed to discharge, irrigation water. You're out there watering your garden, no problem. You're allowed to discharge, fire hydrants, flushing water. And So there's a whole list of things that you can discharge and a whole list of things you can't discharge. What you're not, and I'm guessing this is where the inspector was going with that, John, correct me if I'm wrong, but what you're not allowed to, one thing you're not allowed to discharge is any water that's been changed chemically, like it's come into contact with your asphalt or some part of your process, or any water that's been changed mechanically, i.e. the temperature has been changed. You're not allowed to discharge that. So my guess is the inspector said, hey, this condensate water is coming off. It's cold. The temperature has been changed, and that's why they cited them for that. Realistically, that condensate water is never making it to the property line. And so, you know, it wouldn't matter. But John, that's probably the type of thing that if your site plant manager just called you and you got on the phone with the inspector, you probably could have diffused that right there, and it wouldn't have shown up in the letter.
Yeah, of course. And some of the others here, as I'm looking through the notes, yeah, the SWIP plan was not signed, so we got dinged for that. There was documentation for some of the quarterly visual assessments was weak or non-existent. So yeah, just again, all the stuff that we're talking about today. And again, in the scheme of things, it's all relatively minor, but yet has an impact on our business. So,
you know, that's why for the companies we manage, like the Wayne Davises of the world, we try to do everything turnkey, where we don't leave it up to the plant managers to do anything. Hey, we're doing the inspections, we're doing the report writing, we're making them sign it, you know, all of that, because hey, everybody's busy. These guys are trying to make concrete, and sometimes things just go missing otherwise. Other questions or comments? Great, hey, John, great story. Thank you for sharing that. Other questions or comments? And Emily, cut us off whenever you need to. Guys, I'm sure we have at least one more question or comment. Like I said, there are no bad questions or comments.
Yeah, this is Paul Fly. I have one question concerning when we're in a quarry and our property in the quarry leaves and goes downhill into the quarry's water, what responsibility do we have for you know, the particles and the pH leaving our portion of that quarry?
Paul, I don't know your exact situation, but the short answer to that question is, hey, if you own the quarry and your water is going into, okay, so you know but if you did and you own the quarry and your water is going into the quarry and your water is staying right there on your site, then and nothing's ever leaving the site, then you may be in no discharge because you have nothing leaving your site. But if you don't own the quarry, your discharge point and where you have to sample is where your water leaves your property line. And so where that water is going, you know, that's I'm not going to say irrelevant because there's a nuance here I'm going to talk about in a second, but you're responsible for the quality of the water when it leaves your site. Now, that being said, I want to say last year, EPA had it wasn't the Chevron rule that they had overturned. It was a different one, a more nuanced one. But the Supreme Court ruled if you are discharging to a water body like a quarry that has no ability to get to a stream or a river, they have instructed the states to scale back the regulation burden on that. So I think, you know, at some point that's going to come into effect. But I try to tell my guys, hey, that may come into effect at some point. The state may stop regulating that for right now, but let's be prepared that they're not going to, you know, listen to that. Let's make sure that the water coming off of our site, no matter where it's going, you know, meets the type of quality standards that we're after.
Okay, thank you.
You bet.
Yeah, I almost wonder, I'm thinking about the question. I mean, that property is owned by the aggregate company, right, Paul? And you've got a tenant agreement, you know, a lease agreement. Is that the situation?
That's correct.
So I'm wondering if the language, there may be something in your lease agreement with that company that has certain requirements for what takes place in, environmentally. I don't know. It's been a while since I've studied one of those documents, because you're not the landowner, anyway, that's just one thing that I wonder, that you might want to be interesting to know what's in that lease agreement.
Yeah, that's a good point, Bill, because Bill's right. Sometimes you see where, hey, the person who's receiving your runoff has an agreement to receive that runoff and then not let it discharge from their site. And so it could be y'all have something like that in place. Maybe one more comment or question. Amy, I know we're basically out of time, but if there's anything else, speak up now or forever hold your peace.
Okay. John, you know me, I can't contain myself, and I do have a sense of humor. And I have to tell you that every time you say, treat it like your own backyard, I cringe, because it's like, John, have you seen my backyard? So that might not be, maybe the best way to handle that for future presentations is that you have a snapshot of John's backyard and you say, treat it like the way I treat my backyard, because there may be some of us who, like me, are thinking, no, you don't want to do that.
That's fair enough. I don't want you to see my backyard either, but that's a fair point. Hey, but you know what, Bill, I try to live in the real world. Hey, we're all on industrial sites day in and day out. I've never seen an industrial site, even the best of them, look like your front yard. That's why I say backyard, because hey, we're in the real world here. Okay. Hey, everybody. Thank you, guys. Emily, I'll email you the PDF form of this presentation also, so you're welcome to distribute that if you'd like to. Hey, I'm available. I got my phone number on there, my email on there. Everybody's got my cell phone number, so feel free to call me or text me if you want to shoot the breeze about some specific questions you have, or hey, even if you want to be a private conversation, hey, here's what's actually going on our site. What do you think? Anything we talk about, it just stays between us, so no problem on that. And then, Emily, I'll hand it over to you and Bill. Anything else from you, Emily, that you need from me?
No, thank you so much, John. Just so everyone knows, we will be publishing this webinar, and it will be available on YouTube by the end of the day. So if you all want to rewatch it, you can.
I was talking to one of the clients. I said, hey, I'm giving this webinar on Tuesday if you want to come and watch it. And they said, I can't believe it. They said, I think we'll pass. So, hey, I'm expecting all of you to make me a YouTube star. I want you all chiming in and rewatching this.
John,
Okay.
thank you. Thank you.